I still remember the way her voice sounded that morning. Not loud, not angry, just cold, like someone closing a door that had been open for years. My daughter-in-law stood in the kitchen, her hands resting on the counter, avoiding my eyes. The sunlight was coming in through the window, warm and gentle, but nothing about that moment felt warm to me. She said, "Your time here is over." Just like that. No explanation, no softness, just a sentence that split my life into a before and an after. I didn't argue, I didn't ask why, I didn't even cry, I simply stood there, feeling the weight of every heartbeat echoing in my chest. I had lived in that house for almost 7 years, helping with everything, from raising the children to cooking every meal, folding laundry, staying awake during fevers, and comforting 2 little souls through nightmares and school fears. That kitchen had been my sanctuary, my routine, my place of purpose. And suddenly, with just a few quiet words, I felt like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. I wanted to believe I misheard her. Maybe she meant something else. Maybe she was just upset. Maybe my son would walk in and say, "Mom, don't worry. We'll talk about this," but he didn't walk in. He didn't say anything. He didn't even know what was happening, at least, that's what I wanted to believe at the time. In that moment, I felt something inside me fall apart quietly. There was no loud heartbreak, no dramatic scene, no shouting. Just a slow, painful realization that the home I thought I belonged to might not be mine anymore. I took a deep breath, held onto the kitchen counter for support, and whispered, "All right, if that's what you want." But inside, I felt like someone had gently taken my hands off the life I was holding onto. And that's where my story begins, with quiet heartbreak, unexpected betrayal, and a journey toward understanding why the people we love the most sometimes push us away. My name is Maria, and I am 67 years old. For most of my life, I believed that family was everything. Not in a dramatic way, just in a simple, everyday way. I believed in cooking meals together, talking through problems, forgiving quickly, and showing up for each other without being asked. Maybe that belief was old-fashioned, but it was what I grew up with, and it shaped the kind of mother I became. I raised my son, Daniel, alone after losing my husband when Daniel was only 12. It wasn't an easy life, but we survived by holding on to each other. I worked long hours, sometimes 2 jobs, just to keep the bills paid and food on the table. But no matter how tired I was, I always made sure we ate dinner together. That was our ritual, 1 hour every night where the world felt calm. Daniel grew into a kind young man, quiet, thoughtful, gentle. He always told me he would take care of me when he grew up. I didn't raise him to make promises like that, but hearing it always warmed my heart. When he met his future wife, Emily, I was happy for him. She was polite, reserved, smart, and ambitious. They seemed like a good match, and I didn't want to be one of those mothers who held onto their sons too tightly. So I supported their relationship, their wedding, their plans, their whole new life. When they had their first child, Lily, everything changed for them, and for me. They were overwhelmed, sleep-deprived, struggling with work, and constantly anxious about doing everything right. So I stepped in, not because they asked, but because that's what mothers do. I cooked, cleaned, babysat, and kept the house running while they tried to keep up with their careers and new responsibilities. It wasn't supposed to be permanent. I told them I'd help, for a little while. But weeks turned into months, and months turned into years. Before I knew it, I felt more like the invisible thread holding the home together, quietly supporting everything from behind the scenes. When their second child, Noah, was born, my presence became even more necessary. I woke up early every day, packed lunches, folded laundry, tidied toys, washed dishes, and kept the home warm and running smoothly. I never complained. I never asked for anything. My joy came from watching my grandchildren grow and seeing my son laugh again. But slowly, so slowly I didn't notice it at first, something in the house began to change. Emily stopped talking to me as much. She stopped saying, "Thank you." She stopped asking how I was doing, or if I needed anything. Little by little, she grew more distant, more tense, more guarded around me. Sometimes I wondered if I had unknowingly overstepped somewhere. Maybe I cleaned something she didn't want touched. Maybe I comforted the children too quickly, making her feel replaced. Maybe my presence reminded her that she wanted more control over her own home. But I brushed those thoughts aside. Families go through phases, I told myself. Still, there were moments when the silence in the house felt heavier than usual. When Emily would come home from work, see something I did, and her expression would briefly darken, not angry, just bothered. Irritated, worn down, and I tried to ignore the sinking feeling in my heart. I loved them. I wanted to help. I wanted this home to feel peaceful and warm. But sometimes love makes us blind to the signs that something is shifting beneath our feet. And that shift was about to become an earthquake. Life in my son's house began to feel different long before the words were ever spoken. It happened slowly, like a quiet shift in the wind that you don't notice at first. One small moment at a time. At the beginning, I tried to believe everything was normal. I told myself, she's young, she's adjusting, maybe I'm getting in the way without realizing it. But every week, something felt a little colder, a little sharper, a little more distant. It started with small changes at the dinner table. My daughter-in-law, Maya, would cook separate meals for herself and my son, while leaving me a plate of leftovers in the microwave. "Oh, I thought you'd be fine with this," she'd say with a soft smile that didn't reach her eyes. I would nod, even when my heart dipped a little. Of course I was fine. I had eaten simple food my whole life. But what hurt was the feeling of not belonging. My son, Arjun, didn't notice at first. He was always working, always tired, always rushing. When he came home, he would kiss her forehead, ask about her day, and then go straight to the bedroom to rest. I didn't blame him. I only wished he looked at me long enough to see the strain on my face. Then came the accidental comments. When guests visited, Maya would joke lightly, "I hardly get space in this house anymore." Everyone laughed. I laughed too, but inside something tightened. Some days, she complained about how crowded the living room felt when I sat there sewing. Other days, she sighed loudly when I used the washing machine. One evening, I heard her whisper to my son in the kitchen, "We really need our own space. We're grown adults, yet we're still living like college kids." I wasn't meant to hear that. But I did. And the silence afterward, the heavy one that settled between all three of us, that was the beginning of the real conflict. Arjun started spending less time with me. Meals became quiet. My presence became something they worked around instead of with. One morning, I overheard the sound of boxes being dragged from the storage room. They talked in hushed voices. "We need to declutter," Maya said. "There's too much of her stuff everywhere." My stuff. Old photos. My husband's books. The blanket I had crocheted years ago. Memories. Pieces of me. When I walked into the room, the conversation stopped. They smiled at me, but the air was heavy with the truth neither of them dared say aloud. My time in that house, my son's house, was becoming an inconvenience. I could feel it every time Maya closed a door softly behind her. Every time my son avoided my eyes. Every time the home I once helped keep warm began to feel like a place I was simply passing through. The conflict didn't come like a storm. It came like a slow evening, one where the sunlight fades little by little, until suddenly you realize the room is dark, and you're sitting there alone. The turning point came on a quiet Sunday morning. It was one of those mornings when the house felt too still, the kind of silence that makes you feel unwelcome without anyone saying a word. I was sitting at the kitchen table, folding the last of the laundry. I had just finished ironing my son's shirt, the one he liked to wear to work on Mondays. I remember smiling to myself, thinking he would appreciate it, but then I heard footsteps. Slow, heavy, hesitant. My daughter-in-law walked in first. She didn't look at me. She kept her eyes on the floor, twisting her fingers nervously. My son followed behind her, his face tight, like he had practiced something difficult and wasn't sure he could say it out loud. I looked up, expecting maybe they needed help with something. But the air felt different, distant, cold, almost rehearsed. "Mom," my son began, clearing his throat. "Can we talk?" I nodded gently. "Of course." He sat down across from me, but she didn't sit. She stood behind him, her arms crossed over her chest, her shoulders stiff. My heart knew something was wrong before he said another word. My son inhaled deeply, then whispered, "Things are getting a little complicated around here." I tried to smile, hoping to ease whatever tension was there. "If I've done something wrong, tell me. We can fix it." He hesitated, looked at her. She nodded at him, almost signaling him to continue. And then, with a voice that sounded nothing like the boy I raised, he said, "Mom, we think it's time you consider going back to your own place." My hands froze over the folded shirt. My breath caught in my chest. I felt the moment sink into me, heavy and sharp. I asked softly, "Did I upset you? Did I make you uncomfortable?" Before my son could answer, my daughter-in-law finally spoke. Her voice was calm, firm, almost practiced. "This isn't your home anymore," she said. "Your time here, it's over." The words didn't echo. They didn't shout. They just settled into the room like a quiet storm that had been waiting all along. I stared at my son, my baby boy. The one whose scraped knees I once bandaged. The one I stayed up late with during his exams. The one who used to kiss my cheek every morning before school. He didn't look back at me. He kept his gaze on the table, unable to lift his head. I whispered, "Is that how you feel too?" He didn't reply. His silence said everything. In that moment, I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask why or how or when. I just sat there, feeling the world inside me slowly break apart. And what hurt the most, the thing I felt in my bones, was that I didn't lose my home that day. I lost my son. I packed my things slowly that evening. Not because I needed the time, but because I needed to remember. The sound of my grandson's laughter. The smell of the meals I cooked in that kitchen. The way my son used to rest his head on my shoulder. The feeling of belonging. My daughter-in-law walked past my room a few times but never offered help. My son stayed in the living room, pretending to watch TV. When I walked out with my bag, my grandson woke up and ran to me. "Grandma, where are you going?" His small hands wrapped around my leg. I swallowed the pain. "Grandma will be back, sweetheart. Be good, okay?" He hugged me tighter, the kind of hug children give when they sense something is wrong. It almost broke me. My son finally stood up. "Mom, just call when you reach. Not, stay. Not, don't go. Just, call." I stepped outside. The door closed behind me with a soft click, but it echoed like thunder in my heart. When I reached my little apartment, I sat on the edge of my bed and whispered to myself, "She said my time is over, but maybe this is where my own time begins." It has been months now. My son rarely calls. My daughter-in-law never does. But I've learned something I never understood before. Sometimes leaving is not losing. Sometimes silence is not weakness. Sometimes distance is the only way to protect your heart, even from the people you love the most. I still pray for them every night. Not because they treated me kindly, but because a mother's love does not expire when someone else decides it should. My time in their home may have ended, but my love for them did not. And that, I think, is the quiet strength of motherhood.